Okay, so welcome everyone, and I thought today we might cover the usual landing practice and then go on to a guided practice on taking refuge. So maybe we'll just start by settling into a comfortable position and really just landing in this moment so that we can do the full practice with a sense of presence and awareness and calm. So maybe if you want to settle into a position you find comfortable, it can be sitting or standing or lying, whatever's good for you. And look to have a kind of reasonably straight back so that you're not kind of feeling sleepy, but definitely not rigid or kind of uncomfortable. And then in your own time, maybe close your eyes or just gently lower your gaze and just turn the attention inwards. And the invitation with mindfulness is to settle that awareness, that focus on the breath to start with, as it passes in and out of the body. See if you can just settle in and follow the breath, noticing how it arises, passes in through the tip of the nose, down the throat, then fills the lungs, and you may notice a slight expansion of your chest and tummy, and then the breath passes back out through the throat and the nose. And then there's maybe that little moment of stillness or pause before the next breath. So we settle in on this and use this as an anchor to the present moment. And the invitation is just to use this breath and really notice what's happening moment to moment in the here and now. Just noticing right now, are the breaths long or short, deep or shallow, fast or slow? And noticing how your awareness is following the breath. Are you following the breath from the nose all the way to the lungs and then back as a kind of flow, as a circle? Or maybe just choosing a place, maybe the tip of the nose, and noticing the movement there. And any way is fine, just noticing how your awareness is perceiving the breath, as well as the quality of each breath. And this is the invitation with mindfulness, to use the breath or the body. Today we use the breath just to land in the present moment and notice what's actually happening in reality, right here, right now. So we're not thinking of the future, we're not reminiscing about the past, and we're not wishing that the present was any different. We're just turning up and noticing what's actually happening in this present moment, and accepting that with kindness and with a non-judgmental attitude, just being with it. connecting to and being with life as it unfolds breath by breath. Noticing if the breath has changed at all over the few minutes we've been settling in. And if we notice that our mind has moved off into thoughts, noticing that, not judging it, but just noticing that it's happened, because that is the nature of the mind. But giving a little inner smile and deciding to refocus our attention on the breath again, rather than engage with the thoughts. Because this practice of coming back, creating this habit of awakening out of thoughts and just coming back to the present moment, this is the practice of mindfulness. And we do this as many times as is necessary. Just notice what's happening and to bring our attention back to the breath if it's moved away. The breath arising and the breath passing. Maybe a thought arising and just noticing it. You can even name it if it helps, but then gently placing our attention back on the breath. And as we move towards the end of this landing practice, just noticing if those words cause some other thoughts or feelings to arise. Remembering that the nature of the mind is that when there's any kind of stimulus, external or internal, it will produce streams of thought. And that's completely natural. That's totally fine, but we can choose whether to engage with those thoughts or just to notice them, but decide that on this occasion, we're going to take some time out for ourselves just to stay with the breath. And so we have maybe 3 more breaths, noticing the arising and the passing, and then we'll come back together. And then in your own time, maybe having a little stretch, gently opening your eyes, and maybe having a drink or just moving. And then in a moment, we'll go into the main practice. Okay, so maybe if we can settle back now into that comfortable position, again, just allowing our eyes to gently close or lower our gaze, whatever's comfortable. And I thought today we would just look a little bit at this concept of taking refuge. So maybe we can start by just bringing the attention back to the breath. And this time, seeing if we can follow it as a kind of flow that comes in through our nose and our throat. When it fills our lungs, seeing if we can be aware of the slight movement of our chest and tummy, and then how it moves again as the breath passes out. And there's that stillness, and then the cycle repeats. So seeing if we can notice the breath, but also the wider body breathing and the sensations in the body as each breath cycle happens. And as we settle into noticing that cycle and how the whole body is breathing, maybe we can widen our awareness to see if we can notice and maybe visualize or just be aware of the fact that with each in-breath, all that oxygen is flowing into our lungs and then being dispersed all through our body as part of our body being alive. And then all the used oxygen turned into carbon dioxide is flowing back in and is passing out with the out-breath. So this whole magical process is actually going on with every single breath. See if we can just settle into an awareness of that happening. Whole body breathing as it lives. And as we soften and touch and lean into the fact that this is happening, just noticing that this is happening all the time, every single breath. So we're going to use that awareness that we're experiencing right now with our awareness to just remember that at any point in the day, this is happening. This body breathing, sensations in the body, the breath arising and passing are always there every single second that we're alive. Each breath arising and filling our lungs, empowering our body, and each breath passing. In many ways, that's a statement of the obvious. We know intellectually that this is happening every second that we're alive. But can we also notice how when we're caught in the throes of busy feelings or busy mind with lots of thoughts, particularly if those thoughts are tinged with any kind of suffering like worry or nerves or fear or anger, how we can lose connection to the fact that the body is here and is breathing, how we can get very wrapped up and caught up in only being in those thoughts. And the teacher, John Kabat-Zinn, says, thoughts and feelings are sometimes like bubbles of water in a saucepan full of boiling water. There are loads of them everywhere, and we jump from thought to thought, and there's all this activity. It's fast and it's rapid, and it can be very easy to be caught up in it. So we use the practice of mindfulness to take the saucepan off the heat and allow the water to settle. And then once it's settled, of course, we can see through the water again. And so by touching into and being aware of the body breathing, each breath arising and each breath passing, by creating a habit that we come back to the here and now, you can carry that into the moments when thoughts are strong and are coming relentlessly. And it's very easy to just be caught up in those thoughts or feelings. And we can notice that however busy or active or triggering the thought or feeling is, there is also the breath. And when we notice the breath, we notice the body. And the body breathing. And as soon as we have that connection to something wider, something bigger, we realize that we're not just caught up in the bubble of that particular thought before jumping to the next thought. Actually, those thoughts are just one of a number of things going on, of which the underpinning one is the breath. And as soon as we see that, somehow the bubbles lose their strength and start to evaporate. And we can touch into the wider reality and feel more grounded, we can gain more perspective. And we notice that our true nature is actually just like the water, to be transparent, to see everything, rather than being enveloped in the bubble of that particular thought. And so there is this concept of taking refuge. That when we notice our minds are busy or painful feelings or thoughts are arising, when there's agitation or stress, when there's some kind of suffering, the invitation is to take refuge in what's also happening in any of those moments, to simply drop back into the breath and feel the body. And by bringing our awareness to that, we can take refuge in what's actually happening rather than imaginary things that are causing us suffering. Just simply following each breath as it arises, as the lungs take that oxygen to power our body, and as each breath passes, each breath arising, the body breathing, and each breath passing. And that little pregnant pause, that moment of stillness before the next breath. And now, of course, sometimes thoughts and feelings arise and difficult moments arise with related suffering because of an external event. And the nature of life is that there is always change, and constant change means sometimes nice things are happening and sometimes not nice things are happening. If we can stay connected, we can take refuge when thoughts build off external events and start to trouble us. We can reground. We can see things in perspective. We can address the external event with a sense of calm, of rationality. We can respond rather than react. And perhaps most importantly, you can see the external event is just the external event, and that many times the difficulty or the real difficulties and the pain or suffering arises from thoughts that are building off and exaggerating the external event. So we can address the root of what's actually happening rather than the illusion of what our mind is projecting off that. And again, we do this by just taking refuge back in the reality of the here and now, which we connect to with the anchor of the breath and the body. Each breath arising, each breath passing. If we notice a thought arising, we can see that and notice it. We can choose to gently move our attention back to the breath rather than choosing to engage with the thought. And if an external event arises, again, we can notice that. We can either react to it or we can reconnect, take refuge in the breath and the body, and decide how to respond at the appropriate time. And we can see when the external events producing streams of thoughts that are projecting things onto the external event rather than actually being what's simply happening. And this is one of the miracles of life, that every second, every moment, we have this ability just to connect back to our breath and our body, which are always there, as our refuge to rebalance and reground, to give us this choice of how and even if we're going to respond. Because our inherent nature is this place of calm, this grounded place where we can deal with anything. And it's never more than one breath away. And as we move towards the end of this practice, just maybe in our own time, taking 3 more breaths. Noticing the peacefulness of each breath. The gentle aliveness. The sense of space. And in your own time, I invite you to gently come back and open your eyes when you're ready. Maybe have a stretch or a drink. And I'll just stop the recording now.